Hello students, I welcome you all in this lecture on chemical kinetics. In the previous two lectures in the series, we have discussed various aspects of chemical kinetics like what do we mean by rate of a reaction, what do we mean by the rate law, how we correlate the concentration of reactant and product with the rate constant, what do we mean by the molecularity and order of the reaction, and then we discuss different reactions of zero order, first order, and second order. Now, continuing with the same theme, today we will discuss with a half life. So, when we are talking about a chemical reaction, what is the half life of a chemical reaction? So, it is actually the time taken for the concentration of a reactant to drop to half its original value. So when we are measuring the rate of the chemical reaction, basically we are measuring the concentration, decreasing concentration of the reactant and increasing concentration of the product. So when you're doing that, if you measure the time that is required for the concentration of the reactant to become just half of its initial concentration, that is for the 50% consumption of the reactant, then that time is called the half life. So if you see what is half life, half life is actually the time. And what time? The time which is required for the concentration of the reactant to become just half of its original value. So now we have because we have obtained the different integrated rate laws, so we can obtain the expression for the half life of different reactions. So suppose if you replace in the integrated rate laws of different order reactions with you replace the A with A half, because it is the concentration becomes half in the half life, and T half is actually the time taken. So if you replace all these values in the integrated rate law, what we obtain, we just get the expression for the half life of different order reaction. So this is the zero order reaction, and this is the expression for the half life. Then in the first order reaction, this is the expression for the half life, and for the second order reaction, this is the expression for half life. So T half represent here the time, the half life, and how it is related with the other term. So it depends upon the order of the reaction also. So how these expressions are obtained? Simply what we have done in the different rate law expressions that we have obtained in the previous lecture, we replace the A value, the concentration term, with the half A naught, and the T value with the T half, that is the time taken for the concentration to become half. So if you look carefully to these expressions, one very important point is that for first order process, the half life does not depend on the A naught, that is the initial concentration of the reactant. So if your reaction is proceeding via first order mechanism, then the half life will never be according to the initial concentration. Otherwise, what will happen? Half life for the zero order and second order reaction, it depends on the concentration term. So in the zero order reaction, the half life is what? It is directly proportional to the initial concentration of the reactant. So greater the initial concentration of the reactant, greater will be the half life. But as soon as when the reaction proceeds towards the end, what happens? Because the concentration of the reactant falls, now the half life becomes less and less. For the second order reaction, it is inversely proportional to the initial concentration. So greater the concentration of the reactant at the beginning, smaller will be the half life. Smaller time will be taken to complete the reaction. But as the concentration falls off, now more and more time is required uh, uh, to reach to the half 50% value of the concentration term. So that is how the different reactions in the with the different reaction order, they actually show different behavior in terms of half life. And this could also be one of the method to identify what is the order of the reaction. So if you look at this graph, this is a graph which is plotted for the pressure of methyl isocyanide and its conversion into methyl cyanide. We discussed this reaction in the previous lecture. So this is the pressure of this gas, and plotted along with the time. So this pressure term is actually representing the concentration of the gas here. So this represent here a progressive decrease in the concentration of the gas along with the time. And if you carefully look at this point, from 150 torr, the pressure becomes 75 torr, so it becomes the half of the initial value, and the time required will be what? It is the first half life, right? Now, if you consider the 75 torr as the initial concentration, then at 37.5 torr pressure, now you can consider it again as the half life of the reaction, and now simply you can obtain it by extrapolating these lines. So that is how you get the half life, and we can have different half lives for the similar reaction. So for the first order reaction, because A T becomes a 0.5 A naught in the integrated rate equation. So you just replace these concentrations here, and when you solve the equation, what do you get? T half will be equal to 0.693 upon K. So K is what? It is the rate constant of the first order reaction. T half is the half life in second, and 0.693 is what? It is a constant here. So this we have obtained by solving this logarithm value. So this is a very handy expression, very handy formula, and you can quickly calculate the half-life of a particular first order reaction by just simply putting the value of the rate constant given to you. Otherwise, if the rate constant value is not given and half-life value is given to you, then you can alternatively calculate the rate constant of the first order reaction. So this formula is very important. So let us solve an example here. What is the half-life of N2O5 if it decomposes with a rate constant of 5.7 into 10 raised to power minus 4 second inverse? The second inverse is what? It is the rate constant unit for first order reaction. And this we have seen in the previous lecture, how we obtain the unit of the rate constant. So now let us try to calculate the half-life of this species. So what is the formula for the half-life in the first order reaction? So T half would be equal to ln 2 upon K, that is 0.693 upon the value of rate constant is 5.7 into 10 raised to power minus 4 per second. So if you solve it, what you will get? You will get 1200 second, that is 20 minutes. So this will be what? This is the half-life of N2O5. But before applying this formula, one needs to be really sure that it is a first order reaction. So how will you get that idea? That idea is obtained from the unit of this rate constant. When you look at the unit of this rate constant, you can easily conclude that yes, this is a first order reaction. And now you have to put the expression for the half life of a first order reaction. So that is how you find out that it is a first order reaction, and then you apply this formula here. So the unit of the rate constant, they actually provide a very good indication of the order of the reaction whenever you are solving a numerical. So let us take another example. Suppose this is the first order reaction, and this is the A reactant and getting converted into product. So so many half lives are given here, the first half life. In the first half life, what will happen? The concentration will be just half of the initial value. Now this final value in the first half life, now this final concentration becomes the initial concentration in the second half life, and the final concentration at the end of the second half life, it becomes the initial concentration of third half life, and so on. So because you know that the concentration, the half life of the first order reaction, it does not depend on the initial concentration of the reactant. So this is the first order reaction, and if you look at the graph here, right? So if suppose this is the first this is the initial concentration, suppose, then this is the first half life where the concentration becomes just half. This is the initial concentration, and this is the half way of this concentration. So when you find out the time required to get that concentration, this is the first half life. Now from this place, from this point, what is the half midpoint here? This is the second midpoint. So now this is the second half life. Now this becomes the initial concentration, so this is the midpoint, and again you get the third half life. And if you look at this point, so this is the midpoint, and this if you draw a line here, in that manner you can get the fourth half life. So that is how you get so many half lives in the same reaction. And if you look at the values here, they are just similar values, right? So At the end of the fourth half life, the concentration of the reactant becomes just 1/16th of the original concentration. So you have started with the A naught value, but at the end of the fourth half life, this becomes 1 upon 16th of the A naught. But all these values are similar, all the half lives are same. So this indicates us that in the first order reaction, the half life does not depend on the A naught value. So here you can see a detailed explanation of a different half-life. So suppose we have started our reaction from this point. This is the original initial concentration of species A, the reactant A, and we denote it by the A naught expression. So this is the initial concentration. Now the reaction has started. So this is at the time T is equal to 0. So this is the initial concentration, and once the reaction start proceeding in the forward direction, now suppose this becomes A naught by 2. That is the half concentration of the initial concentration. So all these values, they are different AT values, different time intervals, the concentration values. So suppose at this point, you get the half of the concentration. So the time corresponding to this value become the first half life, T first T half, and you can easily calculate the first half life here. Now this A naught by 2, this becomes your initial concentration, and now you will look at the point at which the concentration becomes just half of the original value. So now it becomes A naught by 4 at this point, and if you draw a line here, you can get the second half life, the time required to become the concentration half of the original concentration, that is the concentration at the end of first half life. So that is how you get the second half life. Now this becomes your initial concentration, and A naught by 4, from A naught by 4. Now what will be the half value of concentration? It will be A naught by 8. So this is the point, and if you draw a line here, you will get the third half life. So in this manner, so many half lives can be obtained here for the first order reaction. But if you look at the values of the half life, they all are same, from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. If you look at the time exists, all the time values, they all half lives, they are just similar in nature. So this gives us a very important indication that I'm repeating, that the half life of the first order reaction, it does not depend on the initial concentration of the reactant. So whatever be the initial concentration, it will take exactly the same time to become half. Now let us talk about the half life of a second order reaction. So we know that for second order reaction, this is the integrated rate law, and in the integrated rate law, what we will do, we will replace the AT concentration term with 0.5 A naught, that is the concentration, half concentration, and the T value with T half. So now if you solve this equation, this at the point of this A, you have put 0.5 A naught, that is half of the A naught, and at the T, you have put a T half. Now if you solve this equation, what you will get, this is the expression for the half life of a second order reaction. So T half would be equal to 1 upon K into A naught. So here the K is what? K is the rate constant for the second order reaction. T half is the half life of a second order reaction, and A naught is the initial concentration of the reactant in the second order reaction. So that is how you get the expression for the half life of a second order reaction. Now let us summarize our findings that we have seen in the previous two lectures, and also regarding the half life. So this is a table summarizing the kinetics of zero order, first order, and second order reactions. So otherwise the third order and so on, these reactions are so uncommon. So we will restrict our discussion up to the second order reaction. So this is the order of the reaction mentioned here, 0, 1, 2. And the corresponding rate law we have discussed when we are relating the concentration term. So for the zero order reaction, concentration term is not included in the rate law. For the first order reaction, the exponent is 1 on the concentration term. And for the second order reaction, the exponent is 2 on the concentration term. Now, from this rate law, we get the differential rate law, and then finally we get the integrated rate law. to denote the overall rate order of the reaction. For the overall order of the reaction, now this is the integrated rate law. Now, from this integrated rate law, we have for the zero order reaction, for the first order and second order reaction. Now, in the integrated rate law, what we did, we just put the value of this A by 0.5 A naught, and for the T, we have put the T half value. So, if you solve the by simple calculation, by simple mathematics, if you solve the equation, you will get the expression for the half life of corresponding reaction. So, for the zero order reaction, we get the half life expression T half would be equal to A naught upon 2K. So the half-life is directly proportional to the initial concentration of reactant. For the first order reaction, you get T half would be equal to ln of 2 upon K. So here the concentration term is not included, and we know that the half-life of first order reaction is not depending upon the initial concentration of reactant. Then for the second order reaction, again we get the expression for the half-life T half would be equal to 1 upon K A naught. So here the half-life of the reaction is inversely proportional to the initial concentration of reactant. Now, if you look at the first order and second order reaction, so for the for the only one type of reactant, when you have only one type of reactant involved in the reaction, the calculations are really easy. So you can easily get for the first order reaction, you can obtain the rate law, integrated rate law, half life for the first order reaction, as well as for the second order reaction in which only one reactant A was involved. But what if we have a second reactant involved in the second order reaction? That is the reaction which is the first order with respect to both the reactant. So in that case, the calculations become much more complicated. So now another term came into existence, that is the K value. What is the value of rate constant if you look at the energy terms? So this K is equal to AE raised to power minus EA upon RT. This is the Arrhenius equation, and now the Arrhenius equation can also be applied here. And from this Arrhenius equation, now we can get the if you take the natural logarithm and you solve this equation. Now from this equation you get the rate constant. Ln k is what? It is the rate constant. So for the complicated reactions, we cannot just apply these simple calculations, and now what we do, we simply apply the Arrhenius equation here, and this is the rate constant. From Arrhenius equation we can calculate the rate constant. All the terms have their usual meaning. So EA is the activation energy for the reaction, R is the gas constant, T is temperature, and A is the concentration term. So now let us look towards the reaction mechanism, because we have seen that from the chemical kinetics, we are not only discussing about the rate of the reaction, the half-life of the reaction, order of reaction, but also we get a good idea of the reaction mechanism by chemical kinetics. The evidence, the chemical kinetic evidences, they are actually they are very good fact in support of a particular reaction mechanism. So first of all, let us see what is a reaction mechanism. So it is actually the sequence of the events that describes the actual process by which the reactants become product. And generally, the reaction mechanism is studied for the complex chemical reaction. So we have seen in the previous two lectures that a reaction can be a simple reaction, and in that case, only one step is there. So we call them the unimolecular reaction, and only one single step is involved in these reactions. But what happens when you go for the biomolecular and trimolecular reaction? They cannot be a single step reaction, because it is highly impossible or unlikely that that the three molecules, they collide with each other at the same time. So it becomes really difficult for the trimolecular or biomolecular reaction to get complete in the single step. So in that case, what happens? The reaction may involve so many steps, and we have seen that the individual steps which are involved in a complex reaction, they are called as the elementary reactions. So for complex chemical reaction, we have so many single steps, and these are called the elementary reactions. And when you look them together, all these elementary steps, they are together considered as the reaction mechanism of the particular chemical reaction. So this idea we are also getting from the chemical kinetics, and the reactions, like I told you, they may occur all at once or through several discrete steps. So each of these processes is known as the elementary reaction or elementary process. So now when you talk about the complex reaction, which are actually involving so many elementary steps, now what happens when you try to find out the rate law? For individual step, you can write down different rate laws. So for a complex reaction, you are not having just only one rate law. Rather, for all the reactions, you will have so many rate laws, and now you have to look them all. So the overall progress of a chemical reaction can be represented at the molecular level by a series of simple elementary steps, or you see the elementary reaction. Now, sequence of the elementary steps that leads to product formation, this is called the reaction mechanism. So, one example is given here of a complex reaction mechanism where you have 2NO plus O2, 2NO2, and simply at looking at the reaction, you can see that molecularity of the reaction is 2, and it may involve 2 steps. So, also when the experiments were conducted, N2O2 were also detected during the reaction. So, N2O2, this it is not included in the reactant side, nor it is present on the product side. So how we detect the N2O2 in this reaction? So it was somewhere involved as an intermediate here, and that is how this is detected. So it is also indicating that this is not a single step concerted mechanism. Rather, it is taking place in different steps which are involving the formation of this reactive intermediate. So let us see what are the possible elementary steps here. So first step would be the combination of two NOs, and they combine together to form N2O2. And in the second step, this N2O2 combines with the O2, and it gives two molecules of NO2. So now if you add these two elementary steps, overall reaction would be 2NO plus O2 is equal to 2NO2. So from the overall reaction, if you get the similar like your chemical reaction, so it means that these elementary steps are possibly true. But now you require the evidence in support of this mechanism. So what would be the possible evidence? Evidence is when we detected the N2O2 during the reaction. So that would be that is the evidence in support of this reaction mechanism. Whenever we are proposing the reaction mechanism, all the elementary steps, first of all, they should all add up and they should give a final chemical reaction similar to the reaction that you know. And also, you should have a particular, if you are showing the formation of some reactive intermediates, then you should have evidence in support of the formation of those reactive intermediates. So, when you write the reaction mechanism, the sum of the elementary steps, it must give the overall balanced equation for the reaction, and the rate determining step, it should predict the same rate law that is determined experimentally. So now, the rate determining step would be what? When you have so many elementary reactions involved in a complex reaction, what would be the rate determining step? It will be the slowest step in the sequence of steps leading to the product formation. So now it becomes so easy from the chemical kinetics that if you are going to see the rate of the reaction, you need not to consider the rate law of all the steps. Rather, you have to see what would be the slowest step among all the elementary reactions. So because the reaction cannot proceed slower than that step. So that would be the rate determining step. The slowest step in the reaction mechanism, it becomes your rate determining step because it will take so much time, it will take the maximum amount of time as compared to all the elementary reaction. So your reaction cannot be slower than that. So when you are considering the reaction mechanism, you will take into account only the rate law, which is associated with the slowest step of the reaction. So in the different type of reactions, we have right now till now we have seen only how the concentrations are getting changed, but now we will also examine what is the path of that chemical transformation, how the reactants they are getting converted themselves into product. So the reaction mechanism is what it is giving us the path of the reaction mechanism. So this mechanism actually provides a very detailed picture of which bonds are broken and formed during the course of a reaction. So what is the elementary step? It is any process that occurs in a single step, and the molecularity is what? It is the number of molecules present in the elementary step. So number of molecules which are actually colliding. So if you look at the unimolecular reaction, one molecule is present in the elementary step. If you are looking at the bimolecular reaction, then two molecules will be there in the elementary step, and in the third molecular reactions you will have three molecules in the elementary step. So it is quite uncommon that you may have three molecules at the same time in the elementary step. So they are generally not possible, because for that to happen, three molecules at the same time, they have to collide together. So that is quite uncommon statistically. So now we can write the rate laws for the elementary step, because since this process occurs in one single step, the stoichiometry can be used to determine the rate law, right? So from the law of mass action, we know that rate of a simple reaction, that is the one step reaction, it is directly proportional to the concentration of reacting substance. So this is true for all the elementary steps. Rather, it is not. Uh, it is a universal fact that yes, how greater will be the concentration of the reactant, greater will be the conversion of them into products. So this is the law of mass action, and therefore, for all the single one-step reaction, you can consider that yes, the rate is proportional to the concentration term. And when you remove the proportionality sign, you will introduce the rate constant here. So see, for the unimolecular reaction, a is equal to product, you have rate law is equal to K into A. For the bimolecular reactant, you have A plus A2 product, so rate would be equal to Ka square. Then in the bimolecular reactions with two different type of reactant, you have rate is equal to Kab. For termolecular reaction, in which three molecules are present at the same time, so you would be having a Ka3, and these are the different termolecular reaction with the molecularity 3. So you may have two or three type of reactants present. So you can notice that the coefficients now they become exponents. So the coefficients of the reaction they become exponent, but it is not true in all the cases. So the molecularity of the process tells how many molecules are involved in the process. But this is not the rate law. The rate law of the elementary step is written directly from that step. So these steps generally they may involve the formation of the reaction intermediates. So what are the intermediates? They are the species. They appear in the reaction mechanism, but they are never seen in the overall balanced equation. So generally they are unstable in nature, and they actually represent the path by which the reactant has converted itself into product. They are never showing us uh, they are never a stable product, so they never appear in the chemical equation. Rather, when we write down the elementary steps for a chemical mechanism, then they are formed in those elementary steps, and then finally when you add the elementary steps, they just cancel out. So the intermediate is always formed in the early elementary step, and it is consumed in the later elementary steps. That is how they never appear in the overall chemical reaction. So they are formed in the early step and they are consumed in the second step. So when you add the two elementary steps, they both cancel out, and when you get the overall reaction, the intermediates are not shown here. For the multi-step mechanism, one of the step will be slower than others, and the overall reaction it cannot be faster than the slowest step. So we consider it as the rate determining step, or RDS. So let us take an example here. These are the cars, and at Plaza A and Plaza B, we have we have to consider these 2 points. So these cars are slowed at Plaza A, and now they cannot reach up to the Plaza B before they are actually reaching. Uh, they are crossing this path. So once you reduce their speed at the Plaza A, now what will happen? They cannot cross the Plaza B with a speed greater than that. So now what happens? This actually represent the path of the reaction mechanism. You can have so many steps involved in the reaction mechanism, but the slowest step, which is representing here by the slowest car, you cannot expect that this slowest car will be taking the highest time to reach the plaza B. So the time taken, overall time taken by the cars, it cannot be faster than that. So for the slow initial step, you have NO2, one example here, NO2 plus CO, NO plus CO2. So this is the chemical reaction, and the rate law for this reaction is found experimentally as KNO2 square. So it has been seen that carbon monoxide is not uh, affecting the rate of the reaction at all. Rather, the rate depends upon the square of the concentration of NO2. So this is found experimentally. This is experimental rate law. Now, what happens to the carbon monoxide? We know that carbon monoxide is necessary for the reaction to occur. But the rate of the reaction does not depend on the concentration of carbon monoxide. How is it possible? So, you can actually see from this example that the experimental rate law can be entirely different from what we are writing down by merely looking at the chemical reaction. So, where is the carbon monoxide term here? Why the reaction rate does not depend on the concentration of carbon monoxide? So, this suggests that the reaction is occurring in the two steps. So, what the proposed mechanism for this reaction is what? In the step 1, you have NO2 plus NO2, and these two species they are combining together, and this leads to the formation of NO3 plus NO. So, this is a slow process. Now, in the step 2, NO3 is combining with the carbon monoxide and converting it into NO2 plus CO2. This is a fast step. So the NO3 intermediate is consumed in the second step. So NO3 is what it is, the reaction intermediate here, and this is the unstable intermediate. So like we have discussed that the reaction intermediates they are formed in the earlier step and get consumed in the later on step. And you know that the earlier step is a slow one, and the second step will be the fast one. So you know that the reaction it cannot proceed faster than this step. So the carbon monoxide it is not involved in the slow step. So this is the rate determining step, and carbon monoxide is nowhere in the rate determining step. So when you write down the rate law, like for the complex reaction mechanism, we have seen that in the rate law we will only consider the rate determining step. So you need not to look at the rate of other elementary steps here. You will only focus on the slowest step, and you will write down the overall rate of the reaction with the slowest step will be there in the rate determining step. So therefore, carbon monoxide does not appear in the rate law because it is not a part of the slowest step involved in the reaction mechanism. Now, for the fast initial step, you have a second early step. So now you see another example here: 2NO plus Br2, 2NO-Br. So the rate law for this reaction is found to be experimentally KNO square Br2. So here, how the bromine is getting a place in the reaction mechanism? Again, this could be a question. NO square is also, so two molecules of NO are also involved. One bromine molecule is also involved. So this comes out to be that the reaction is what it is, molecular in nature. However, this rate law actually suggests a two-step mechanism because it is not possible that at the same time the two NO and one bromine they are colliding together. So, molecular reactions are extremely rare, and therefore you can consider the reaction mechanism as a two-step mechanism. So, a proposed mechanism is in the first step, one NO combines with the Br2, and you get NO-Br2. This is a fast step, and in the second step, you get NO-Br2 plus NO to NOBR. So this is a slow step. Now, what would be the slowest step here? The rate determining step would be your step 2. So step 1 is an equilibrium. It includes the forward and the reverse reaction both. And this is a fast reaction. And in the second step, you get a slow reaction. But now you know that for writing the rate law of this reaction, you have to consider only the slowest step. So from this slowest step, we can write the rate law like rate 2 is equal to K2 NOBR2 NO. But now what happens? We know that we cannot measure the concentration of NOBR2 because it is an intermediate here. It is a reactive intermediate. So you cannot have a reactive intermediate involved in the rate expression. So, but in our rate expression, we have this reactive intermediate, and the rate law tells us what? that concentration of the intermediate species actually is responsible controlling the rate of the reaction. So we know that intermediates, they are usually unstable, and they have low or unknown concentrations that are difficult to measure. So now how we have to find out some alternative way to remove it from here. You cannot measure the concentration of NOBr2. So how will you remove this term from the rate law? So let us see that NOBr2, it react in the two ways, with NO to form NOBr, which is actually a slower step, and by the decomposition to reform the NO and Br2. So now the reactant and product of the first step, they are in the equilibrium with each other. Therefore, you can write it like rate of the forward reaction becomes equal to the rate of the reverse reaction. So now, if you assume that K2 is far greater than K3, K2 is this, right? K2 is the conversion of NOBr2 into NO and Br. This rate is quite greater than the K3 because it is what? It is a slow step. So now you can write it like a rate of the forward reaction would be K1 NOBr2 and K minus 1 represent the backward reaction. So it will be NOBr2. So when you solve this equation, solving for the NOBr2, because we need to remove this term from our rate expression. So you have to find out the value of it. So that will be K1 upon K minus 1 NOBr2 is equal to NOBr2. So that would be the term that we are getting after solving these two equations. So now what we do, we just substitute this expression for the NOBr2 in the rate law, overall rate law of the chemical reaction for the rate determining step. So this would be the expression that we are getting. Rate will be equal to K2 K1 upon K minus 1 NOBr2 NO. So when you solve it further, this K2 K1 upon K minus 1, this becomes an overall K, and this becomes the NO square into Br2. That would be the overall rate law, and that is how the NO and Br2 both are getting a place in the rate expression. So rate law for the multi-step mechanisms are written like this, and most of the reactions, they proceed through more than one step. Generally, it has been seen that because so many molecules are involved in the reaction, generally two reactants are there, so they cannot complete the reaction just in a single step. So they usually take place with more than two steps. So the proposed mechanism is for this reaction is NO2 plus NO2, NO3, NO. So this is the slow step. And NO3 getting combined with the carbon monoxide forming NO2 and plus CO2. This is a fast step. So when you find out the overall reaction, these NO3 terms and NO2 terms, they just cancel out. And finally, you get this balanced chemical equation after summing up the two elementary steps. So now you can notice that if we add the above steps, we get the overall reaction like this. So if a reaction, it proceeds via several elementary steps, then the elementary steps must add to give the balanced chemical equation. Now we know that intermediate, it is a species which appears in the elementary step, and it is not a reactant or product. So they are formed in one elementary step and consumed in the other. So for example, we have the NO2 here, we have NO3 here, which is our intermediate, which is getting formed during the reaction, getting formed in the earlier slow step and getting consumed in the fast later on step. So this is the reactive intermediate which actually cancel out in the overall chemical equation. Often one step is much slower than the others, and the slow step actually limits the overall reaction rate. So this is called the rate determining step of the reaction, and this step governs the overall rate law for the overall reaction. So from the previous example, we have seen that the theoretical rate law would be rate is equal to K NO2 square. So it is not including any intermediates here, right? So experimentally determined rate law would be rate is equal to K NO2 square. So this supports our mechanism. Your experimental rate law is identical with the theoretical rate law that you have calculated from the reaction mechanism. So let us look at it again. If this is the slow step, right? Then from this slow step, what you get, this would be the, how would you write the rate law? This would be NO2 square. So now I have few questions for you. from this lecture. First of all, you have to write down what is first order reaction. So in you have to define the order of the reaction, and also you have to write down the different examples. So generally in the in the chemistry, we have so many first order reactions involved. So like the radioactive decay is also a first order reaction. So you have to find out such reactions which are common to us, commonly known to us, and you have to give examples of first order reaction. Then what is the second order reaction? So you have to define the order of the reaction, and then you will find out the examples of the second order reaction. Now you have to comment on the half-life of a first order and second order reaction. So how do we get the half-life terms? We have seen that for getting the half-life term, you just take the integrated rate law of that particular reaction. Suppose a first order or second order reaction, you just take the integrated rate law. Now you replace the concentration term with the half of the initial value, that is 0.5 A naught value, and you replace all the times with T half. So that is how you solve the equation, and you can get the expression for the half-life of that reaction. So then the fourth question for you is a first order or a second order reaction is completed. So now you have to find out when the reaction will complete, when you consider it as a complete reaction. Because when you plot the graph between the concentration and time, after a certain time interval, what happens? The concentration of the reactant it never becomes zero, right? What happens? It becomes constant. So rate of the change of concentration becomes constant. So when you consider that a first or second order reaction is complete, then next question is, for a first order reaction, 1 hour is needed for a change of concentration to from C to C half. So from C it becomes C half in 1 hour. So in what time it will be becoming from C2 to C4? That is a C by 2 to C by 4. So you have to find out the second half life of the reaction, and it is very simple. You can just refer to the graphs we have seen for the half life. And the last question is, what is the special characteristic of a zero order reaction? So zero order reactions are really very special because in that case, no matter whatever be the initial concentration of the reactant, it is not going to change the rate of the reaction. But yes, it is going to change the half-life of the reaction. So greater the concentration, greater the initial concentration of the reactant, more will be the half-life of the reaction. That we have seen from the half-life expression of zero order reaction. Half-life is directly proportional to the concentration of a reactant, initial concentration of the reactant for a zero order reaction. So these are all the questions for you. Here are the references for today's lecture, and that is how we have completed so many aspects of chemical kinetics, and we have completed 3 lectures by now, and we have one more lecture left in the chemical kinetics, and that would be on the activation energy, the energetic aspects of different chemical reaction. So in that lecture we would be discussing about the activation energy, Arrhenius equation, and the process of catalysis. So that is all from my side for today. Thank you so much.